name is Richard Capone. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Let's Go Learn. And so today, we're real lucky to have Dr. Angela Bost covering operationalizing behavior systems within the MTSS framework. So Dr. Bost is the VP of Partner Success at Let's Go Learn, but she's a practitioner, and she was the former Deputy Superintendent of Alamance Burlington Schools in North Carolina. And this means she has a tremendous amount of experience in actually rolling up those sleeves and implementing programs. And that's why you're so lucky today to have her talking about this topic. Real quickly, just quickly about Let's Go Learn. The reason why we are hosting this webinar is because, we're a company that provides a powerful platform supporting special education as well as MTSS. And so being a software company, it's not just about implementing great tools. It's also about actually implementation and making sure it works with fidelity at the school district. So that's what we're focusing on today. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Bost.
Thank you, Rich.
Oh, Angela, your audio cut out.
Is this good? Is this better?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear right now. Sounds good.
Okay, my apologies. I wanted to start by thanking you for attending. And as Richard said, I spent a lot of time in district leadership and school leadership, but my last 11 years in K-12 were as a deputy superintendent. And each year, the list that you see on the right got longer and more daunting. Now, that's not all inclusive. I don't want you to think that's all I think that you work on. But as you stay in a position, you tend to learn more about how you're being measured, and it keeps you awake even more at night. We had put a differentiated academic core in place in Alamance Burlington and the tiered support, but we're starting to see some gains, but not the gains we needed to see. And we realized we needed to do something different than what this guy who represents me is doing, and I call that admiring the problem. We had put a lot of well-intended things in place, like training and more training and even more training. We had basically urged people to stop suspending students so much. When you land on enough lists, you get desperate. Adding positions to focus on behavior, so throwing human resource at it, adding some specialized programming, and also new programs and resources. I'm not going to talk about specific programs and resources during this webinar, but I can assure you that what you're already using can likely be used. So it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel or purchase something different necessarily as you implement your behavior core. So that's a little bit of good news. Essentially, you just have to think about changing how you're doing business at the district level and the school level. When we started implementing a behavior core, we chose to focus on these key components: instruction, curriculum, environment, and resources. And of course, at the center, the data and evaluations, because without that, which is often a missing link when districts are trying to implement systems that support increasing student outcomes and changing practices. And that is the data and evaluation piece. So I want to spend some time in each of these components. And then, as Richard said, we'll take questions. So instruction, what that is teaching school-wide expectations. That seems very simple, but it can be very complicated to get that standardized across a large district or large schools if you're working at the building level. It has to involve all faculty and staff. You can't, no one's off the hook, is what I used to say. And especially your student support services staff, they are a critical part of this. So it involves everybody, but you will need a core team to facilitate the development and implementation of behavior interventions and supports framework. And that core team can range from different roles and responsibilities. That's really less important than having the right people to provide leadership for this, and people who really believe in the power of collective efficacy, and that you can really change student behaviors and how we approach that. Some of the practices and components we focused on: explicit instruction, including modeling and role playing with specific feedback; an acknowledgement system. You may have a reward system in place. We moved to an acknowledgement system because we know that behavior is learned. And so we want to acknowledge when behaviors are exhibited that we want, instead of making it look like it was extrinsic in nature. It actually is from within the student. You have to have a system for collecting the data. We created our own. I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. And culturally responsive and inclusive practices obviously were a key practice and component. All these sound simple and self-explanatory. Why wouldn't you do this? We had to keep that at the forefront of our framework so that we didn't leave out one of those critical components. Some of the resources that you have to have in place, and again, I haven't used titles of these things because you may have something in another state that serves the same purpose of something we use, and I'm happy to talk with you more in depth about that later. But of course, your student code of conduct. It can't sit out here in the periphery. It has to be a centerpiece of what you're doing, because that's what your principals, your assistant principals, your teachers, your public, your board of ed, that's what they're looking to your guidance for behavior in your school district or your school. Another key resource is having some way to outline and train to and support classroom versus office managed behaviors. We know we can't tell teachers stop writing kids up for whatever it is, insubordination with 3 bold lines under it. You may have gotten one of those before, but we have to be very explicit about that. What are major and minor infractions? And we created a flow chart for that really proved to be very useful. It often is not that our adults in the district don't want to do the right thing. It's just that they're really not sure what the right thing is at certain points in time. And of course, we did have a 3-tier intervention support model for behavior and a step-by-step referral system. All of these resources I'm willing to share with you if you want to reach out to me at some point in the future. And a behavior data management tool. I wish that we had something that was automated. I am very excited to forecast that Let's Go Learn is going to be launching a behavior data management tool that we will be using with districts who work with us in the professional development and ongoing support and training, because we know that no amount of data that you gather will change practice and improve outcomes for students if it's not anchored in strong professional development and coaching. The curriculum, obviously, you've seen the matrices for programs like PBIS, or I guess I shouldn't call that a program, an approach that defines expectations in every single setting, school-wide and classroom expectations. Stick to 3 to 5 overarching expectations. We decided to do that because it does allow schools some defined autonomy. We set the banks of the river, and then they could decide, what are some things we want to add to that, and got some really good customized to the school, tailored to the school approaches in place. And then our instructional design, our lesson plans, making teaching expectations in every setting a part of that. And then another part of the curriculum has to do with the scheduled meetings with students. If it was a check-in in the morning, check-in at lunch, check-in at the end of the day, but regular check-ins, nothing fancy. You're checking on students, and every adult in the building has an obligation to do that. And you will be surprised, if you haven't already tried that, how effective that can be for the adults and the children in your buildings. Please don't leave out the environment. This is often overlooked. Bus stops, even in North Carolina, we are responsible for what happens at that bus stop. You may be too. We have to teach explicitly how we want students to act at the bus stop. All these settings. So don't limit it to just the classrooms. That's a mistake we made at first. And once we got that cleared up, we saw a lot of improvement. And you can't just do it the first day of school and have the students sign that they have read the code of conduct, and moms and dads sign it, or caregivers. You have to do it at the change of the semester, after winter and spring break, and other times when that you deem necessary. The data and evaluation piece. So there's two key aspects to this. We can't just measure what the students are doing in student behavior in isolation, but we wanted to focus on what adults were doing to impact student learning, of which behavior was a critical part. And so we did build that into this process. That takes some careful explanation and delivery. And I will say, none of this obviously can happen overnight, even a couple months, even a semester. But if you were to start some of these steps this spring, you could easily be ready for a fall launch, if not before. You just start somewhere. I would encourage you. The critical components of our data and evaluation were ensuring that our Tier 1 supports were implemented continuously. So before you gather the data, start gathering the data. Before you do that, make sure that the implementation is solid. Don't put the cart before the horse. And then the diagnostic process is a critical component. And you can see that I put a little bit too much on this slide. This is so important because, again, it is the catalyst for true change that lasts over time. Other things to consider: data from tools you're already using. There's so many out there, but are they used in isolation? Like I mentioned, the student code of conduct, or are they integrated into the work, and do they make sense for the adults and the students who are either gathering the data or a part of that data collection process overall? Office referral data. It's additional data to consider. I like that situated there, because before we started in earnest working on implementing a differentiated behavior core and tiered support across a district of 22,500 students, it really was just about, how many times a student was sent to the office, how many times a student was suspended, which is not autopsy data. There's not really a lot you can do about it. And so we, over time, just started doing more and more that impacted all the time up until that point. And then students with 2 or more office discipline referrals for the same behavior. I'm just listing some things that were part of our additional data sets. And then what we call the Big 5 referral reports, per day, per month, by problem behavior, by location, by time. Is it something so that you can appropriately address the issue at hand? I think it's also important to note that you have to have something in place for making sure that adults aren't causing students to go through the system of support and all the steps when they're demonstrating behavior that is dangerous to self or others. That needs to go automatically to Tier 3. And then the fidelity checks. I mentioned before that we had an academic and behavior core observation tool and a monthly incident review. Again, our academic and behavior core observation tool, our academic tool for monitoring the health of our academic core. We did have a tool that teachers could enter from their phone or laptop or iPad Behavior core, we didn't. We couldn't. I don't even think there was anything out there to take a look at. So that's why I'm thrilled that that's one of the pieces that we're going to be able to provide to school districts. I won't go all over everything that I'm so proud of that we were able to accomplish, and either indirectly or directly point back to the work that we had done with installing a behavior core and tiered supports in our district. But we did do it across 37 schools, and we monitored it, both the academic and behavior at the same time. We did start driving up student outcomes or down if we're talking about disproportionality and students who overrepresentation. That takes a while to chip away at, but when you can link it to a practice that you're doing, that's always exciting. It means that you can really celebrate a win and know how you got there. Our graduation rate rose to the highest in district history and above state average for all student groups. And especially, I want to point out students with special needs too. Average is never good enough, in my opinion. Our district was not like the average district in the state when you look at demographics and poverty level and the second language acquisition situations we had in place. So I call it the causing all boats to rise. It's not okay to just hang your hat upon the progress of students who already pretty much know how to behave and read and write in all settings. And we were also the top 20 in growth in the state of North Carolina across 115 districts. And that's an aggregate number where in the denominator was all students. And if they fit in more than one student group, they were in there more than once. So that is a brief overview of what we put in place. We are going to be expanding upon that at a conference in March. If you want to really get in depth, because obviously that was very high level and not into the specifics, it is going to be held in March in Wilmington, North Carolina. And on this last slide, you have a way to contact me, schedule a meeting with me if you want to get further information, if you want to hear more about the conference, or if you just have a question and you want to ask me, because as Richard said, I'm a practitioner at heart. It's always going to be my goal to help districts, especially when our end game is to improve outcomes for students and change their lives. So
there's a couple questions. Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the questions is, who are the key players you had to win over internally in order to have a successful behavior framework implementation? That's a good question.
Yeah. So principals, and it's not necessarily that they resisted it, but I believe they're the most influential group of people in your district, and particularly high school principals when you're talking about your suspension rates, really want to address and the high school teachers with whom they work. So that's an important place to start. And even with informal conversations, and with when I had those conversations with principals, I quickly learned who I would like to be involved in my core team, our core team that I mentioned earlier in the webinar. So, and I have some strategies for that I'm happy to share with you. I do think that keeping the board informed along the way, I just went there. I decided let's let the board know what we're doing. Yeah, I would start with principals.
I have a follow-up question.
Sorry.
Okay. I have a follow-up question. This is my question, Angela.
Okay.
I think it sounds like you guys, you're a deputy superintendent, you were charged with this, so there already was maybe some background about understanding MTSS framework. What would you say to some districts where they don't even have maybe that background or cultural history of understanding an MTSS framework? I personally have seen some states where it seems like MTSS is very, very loose, right? How would you go about, initially bringing up the awareness of it? I mean, because if you're one person and this is important, but how do you rally the troops? So first of all, try to get a buy-in at the board level, the superintendent level. Do you get your core group together? Do you have to do some kind of educating across the district to sort of get people on board? What are some key ways of sort of making that happen?
So most schools and districts have groups in place, be it teacher leaders, be it department heads, at the district level. If you've had strategic planning recently, you probably still have some of those focus groups in place. And just it's tedious work, but starting to acclimate those stakeholder groups to the notion that if we do this, then it will improve outcomes for students, and it will also address what we know to be high leverage practices like collective efficacy, like teacher clarity, and kind of meeting them where they are. I would also start with taking a look at your academic core. Now, I'm not even talking about tier 2 and 3, just your academic core. That's where we started, and what we learned is there was no need in trying to get everyone to do tier 2 and 3, and that's what we had been trying to do when our differentiated academic core isn't in place, because we were sending students to tier 2 and 3 that didn't need to go because we needed to fix what was broken at the classroom level. So that's what I call starting somewhere, and you don't have to eat the whole elephant. You can just start with that.
That's great. Here's another question. Can you expand on what you meant by adult check-ins? Are you talking about teacher mentoring programs, or please expand on that?
Thanks. So what we did is we asked, and I was fortunate enough that when we asked people to do, for the most part, they did. And we had done so much foundational work that was so important. So I'm glad those questions came up as well. And we decided that every child would have at least one kind, caring adult checking on them. Now, some, our large high schools, the way they accomplish that is they could even still call it homeroom. But that homeroom teacher was invested in how those students were doing and not just academically. So some of the students didn't even know they were being checked on. But we started really working on that and measuring it in a meaningful way along with the other data. So that's what that means.
Right, let's see here. Let's see if there's any other questions here. I'm sorry, sifting through it. I guess that's some of the other stuff are logistical ones. All right. I don't think there's any other questions for right now.
Okay.
So, all right, I guess we'll wrap it up. So if you guys do think of a question, you see Angela's email right there. If you also want to schedule a meeting and talk to her, go ahead. If you even want to just find out more about Let's Go Learn and our core diagnostic assessment, progress monitoring and SDI system, go ahead and just fill out the form and let Angela know, and she'll connect you with an educational consultant in your state. And also recently we were case endorsed, so we're real excited about that. I mean, they endorsed us for our entire platform. Well, anyway, Angela, I'll let you have the last words.
Last word. So I would just, encourage you to start somewhere, and don't give up, because our children are worth it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.